I want you to imagine being put onto a train car meant for cattle. The inside dimensions of the car, about 27 feet by 7 feet. There would be up to 150 people per train car. You would have about a square foot of space for yourself. In your head, imagine your most valuable items. All of them have to fit into a small suitcase. You wear as much clothing as you possibly can because the Nazis tell you we're relocating you to a new location, a new camp, a re-education camp, or a work camp because you're paying off your debt of being born Jewish. Oh yes, and this is for educational purposes only. This is not meant to incite hate speech or violence or promote or glorify anything like Nazism. It's education. They say that you'll be given a place to live and a job and that you'll be reunited with your families. They shove you onto a train car, and sometimes they made you pay for the train car. They made you pay for them to relocate you. Many Jewish people packed their family heirlooms, money, dishes, food, and wore all of the clothes that they would be carrying. When the Nazis would arrive to any city, they would section off a small part and use that as the ghetto, where they would relocate all of the Jewish people to that area. Sometimes they would relocate them several cities away or take them to a camp. But imagine this happens to you. The Nazis show up and tell you that you can only take what you can carry, and you had to move into a new area. Sometimes you wouldn't even get to live in a house or an apartment. You would have to live in some kind of a warehouse. And most of the time you would have to share a living space with other families. You were often lucky if you had heat, and especially lucky if you didn't die of dysentery or typhus or some other communicable disease inside of these cramped ghettos, or even a Nazi raid. Inside the ghettos, the Nazis would often raid homes and take people, take their lives, and they would make an announcement every once in a while. All people of a certain age, or all people with the last name starting from A to C, will be loaded onto a train car tomorrow morning. Come to the train station with your most valuable belongings. One time a student asked me why the Nazis wanted people to bring their valuables and bring their luggage on the train cars. It would just take up space when they were just going to kill them anyways. Well, the Nazis were stealing the valuable items, the money, anything that they could get their hands on, and then they were redistributing all of the clothes and the shoes and the textiles to people within the Reich, because the Reich was very poor. And before the Nazis put a complete ban on Jewish people leaving Germany, they would require Jewish people to pay a fee in order to leave Germany, because they were trying to get out. And hundreds of thousands of them did get out, and they were required to pay up to 90% of their wealth to the Reich just to leave. So imagine yourself on this train car. Somebody notices that a small window has bars on it, and those bars are loose. They try to pull them off, but only the smallest children could fit through the window. So parents would shove their kids out of the windows and say, "Run, you have one last chance, go." More often than not, children did not make it. At least 764 people survived the Holocaust by escaping out of a train car window on their way to a camp. Your chances of surviving leaving the train like that were slim, because a Nazi could see you and shoot you while you were escaping the window, or you could be injured while falling out and not be able to move on, or you could get out and then you were stuck in the woods with nowhere to go, with not very many clothes, perhaps in the middle of winter. If you made it off of the train alive, then you would have a slim chance of finding resistance fighters or partisans located in the woods, and they would help you. Sometimes you had to go to random people's houses and just hope that they weren't going to turn you in, because the Nazis were always offering rewards for people turning in Jewish people. And if you were hiding a Jewish person or helping out the partisans in some way, you could be punished as well. But back on the train car, the Nazis would often give people a bucket for excrement and a bucket of water, and that bucket of water would spill the moment that the train took off. You could catch water out of the windows if it rained, but it's not really going to work that well. There were oftentimes standing room only train cars, so if people passed away while standing, then they would just be held up by everybody's shoulder because there was no room for them to lay down. And if you were on this train car coming from, say, 1,000 miles away going to a death camp, then perhaps you would be on there for up to 5 days with no food and no water. Now, there's no accurate way to know the percentage of people who died on the transports, but imagine 30% of your cattle car died on the way to, say, the death camp Auschwitz. Now, upon arrival, you would arrive at this narrow platform and they would shuffle everybody off and tell people to go left or right, to go to the side that they would keep for experiments or slave labor, or to the side that would be immediately gassed and burned. Now, say you arrive to the death camp Auschwitz and the people who did not die on transport are immediately sorted into a group of people that they can save for slave labor and experiments, or people who were immediately gassed because they were too old, too young, or too sick to work. Now, sometimes people would recognize the pattern and they would think, oh, all of those people who are going to that side must be getting killed immediately because they are too old, weak, or sick. And they would lie about their age, they would lie about their profession in order to be saved, just in case they made it. Now, you weren't the only cattle car on that train, right? The transport would include, say, up to 50 more train cars, and they could shove 150 people per car if they wanted. That would be 7,500 people that would arrive on one transport. Now, it wasn't always that big, and sometimes there were multiple trains a day. Now, generally, people who were too old, weak, sick, or young would be immediately killed. They would also kill healthy people who maybe fought back, they had an attitude, they weren't cooperating. They would kill people who were intellectuals, they were smart, they were professors. They could start a revolution or a resistance within the camp, so they don't want people like that around. People who were saved were generally between the ages of 14 and 50. They were strong, they were healthy, they had jobs and careers that could be useful to the Nazis, such as a carpenter, they were constantly building things, or a cobbler or a tailor, somebody who could make items for the SS, because they would force them to do that. And they would save people for experiments. We will go over that much later. That is a whole lot to talk about. They would save POWs because you couldn't automatically kill a POW as far as like Geneva Conventions go, but they would do that. And they would save pretty women. You know why? The people who were saved were shaved of all of their hair except for the pretty girls, because you don't want somebody who's bald for that purpose. And they were oftentimes deloused, sprayed with a chemical, because people often had lice. They were given a tattoo of their number, and they were given a set of clothes, and they were told where to go and what their jobs would be. The ones who were automatically gassed were also often shaven because the Nazis would repurpose the hair to make socks for the soldiers or to stuff pillows because, again, the Reich was poor. And the gas chambers would be filled with up to 2,000 people. A little door above would drop in tiny pellets called Zyklon B. It was a pesticide that was produced on site at the Auschwitz complex that had 3 different compounds. We'll talk about that as well. And in 20 minutes, everyone would suffocate. A quick interruption. If you're enjoying this, remember to hit like and subscribe for more, because this is what I do. This is my thing. And I've heard that subscribing and liking helps the algorithm. Sometimes people would trample over each other in order to get to the top where they thought the air would be safer to breathe so that they wouldn't suffocate. Sometimes people would survive because there might be a puddle of water inside of the gas chamber and Zyklon B didn't react well with water. So they would be breathing in this humid air and they wouldn't suffocate. When the Sonderkommando found them, when they were emptying the bodies, they would have to execute them because otherwise the Sonderkommando people who found them would themselves be punished. Sonderkommando roughly translates to special unit or elite unit or workforce. They were the ones who were chosen because they were strong. They could lift bodies and move them, put them from the gas chambers into the crematorium. And at Auschwitz, there was a dentist for a while who would come in and rip out all of the gold fillings from the teeth so that they could melt the gold and use it for the Reich. So the Sonderkommando would load people from the gas chambers into the crematorium. Sometimes they would carry them one by one or drag them or put them on a wheelbarrow or something. And so the Sonderkommando would put people from the gas chamber into the ovens, the crematorium, the next room over, and sometimes they would find people they once knew and have to burn their bodies. They became so numb and desensitized to all of this. And within a few months, the Sonderkommando was entirely replaced because they would get too old or too weak, or it would just be time for them because they would have to make sure that people who knew the operation didn't survive, so they would just replace the whole group. Anyways, the ovens would be burning at a temperature so unholy that it would take maybe 45 minutes to burn the bodies, and they would put up to 3 people per oven. Now, kids are small. People who are malnourished are small. There is not a lot to go through when you cremate a body like that. This is not a Holocaust denial. This is educational, obviously, but for anybody moderating this, the people who deny that the Holocaust happened like to say, how could they burn that many bodies? They couldn't possibly get rid of that many people that quickly because today it takes about 2 hours to cremate a body. That's because we have rules and regulations that say you cannot burn at temperatures so hot that it sends black smoke and ash into the atmosphere. The Nazis didn't care about that, clearly. And at camps that did not have a crematorium, or before they were perfected, at camps such as Treblinka, they would burn piles of bodies in big pyres, and they would set fire to hundreds or thousands of people at a time. Sometimes they would bury them and then dig them up and then burn their bodies, and sometimes they would burn their bodies and then bury the ash and the bone. Now, if you were one of the saved people, you would be put into a barrack where you could sleep on a bunk with 2 other people, a small cot-sized bunk, and they would be made of wood. You would be lucky if you got a mattress, and it would be a miracle if you got a blanket. The mattress would often be just a sack filled with hair and or hay, and it would become infected with lice very quickly. You would sleep with all of these other people in the cold with very little to eat, no heat, absolutely no human rights, and you would be forced to work day in and day out. You would have to rise early in the morning and stand in the cold for a roll call. They would call out everybody's number, and the people who died overnight would have to be dragged out of the barracks and accounted for. They would do a roll call at night as well, and you would be put to work making something for the Reich. They had a lot of factories at these camps because the prisoners were forced to make things. It was slave labor. Now, you would have a few months on average to survive a camp like this. You would most likely die of typhus, dysentery, tuberculosis, starvation, freezing to death, being shot because you sat down while you worked or didn't work hard enough, or any other number of things, including electrocuting yourself on the electric fence.